So this is January the 14th, 2019, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this. It's not worth reading, honestly. It's AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order by Kai-Fu Lee. And it's what, basically, without having to read the whole boring book, which I can't imagine anybody would want to read this book, I could just sum it up by saying Kai-Fu Lee believes that China is going to be the new AI superpower. But, I mean, he may be a little bit biased. So, but anyway, because he is, he was the president of Google China. And, anyway, so, I don't know. Honestly, I really don't care that much, I guess. Okay, and this one, Rise of the Superstorms. Now, it's a PBS show, but it's a PBS Nova. It's not like these other ones that I've been talking about, the Frontline. So, if you've been watching, I have a cold, and that's why I'm wearing the zinc on my nose, because it's really attractive. And I wore normal pants today over my long johns so that I could look fashionable with my zinc on my nose. But anyway, this was about the superstorms that are about the hurricanes and such that are coming up the Atlantic and causing a lot of trouble. There's it's in particular, it's about the 2017 ones, but because they caused a lot of trouble. The first one caused $125 billion in damage to Houston, and then there were a bunch more. So yeah, caused a lot of trouble. And basically what they were trying to sum up and say is it's just getting worse. So they said, you know, it used to be you'd rise like in 100 years or whatever, the water might rise a foot in 100 years. Now in a few years, it's rising 5 inches, so it's a big deal, right? So anyway. Now, I'm going to talk about terror in Europe and Myanmar's killing fields, which are both PBS Frontline DVDs, which everyone should watch. And we watched this one first and this one second. This one was done in 2016, this one 2018, so it's very current. And this, well, I'll read what I wrote down about it, because I keep notes of everything, because I don't have a memory like James's. James, I can just, he's my encyclopedia, so I just, when I need some information, just off the top of his head, he knows whatever I need to know. So, but for me, I don't have a memory like that, so I write everything down that I think is important at the time, or whatever. It could be some ideas that I'm, like questions that are rising up, watching things or reading things, and then I go research. So a lot of the time it's stuff like that too. It's questions that I have. And that's the stuff that I really like, is when I start asking questions based on what I've seen or read. Anyway, terror in Europe. Now, this one's about terrorist attacks linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They didn't give a lot of details about the terrorists or what they did. They only really gave details about one young rapper whose parents had died, so he was raised an orphan. I think they did this in an attempt to suggest that although he was the son of Muslim immigrants, he was an orphan, so Europe raised him, and therefore Europe was to blame. They didn't say when he became an orphan, They also tried to suggest that these terrorists aren't overly religious and really didn't know anything about Islam. They did say that since 2015, the Al-Qaeda and ISIS-linked terrorist attacks have killed 200 people and injured hundreds more. And this, I'll remind you, is a 2016 release. So, that's over 1 year that happened. So that's why they made a DVD about it, I guess. Now, as I said, I really enjoyed watching it. So I suggest everybody watches it.
Yeah, the point about them not knowing about Islam, the foot soldiers for the Americans in Vietnam wouldn't have known anything really about capitalism except how it brutalized them, right?
Okay.
So
maybe you're right. Anyway, Myanmar's killing fields. This one's about Myanmar's military response to terrorism caused by the Rohingya. They're a Muslim minority. The UN folks interviewed for this doc called the Rohingya terrorists an insurgency, but the Myanmar are calling it terrorism. Their military is fighting terror with terror. The DVD says that as of May 2018, almost 1 million refugees from Myanmar are living in the world's largest refugee camps across the border in Bangladesh. That's a quote. The natives of Myanmar insist that the Rohingya are foreigners, have no right to be in Myanmar, and are not welcome to stay there. So the natives of Myanmar are Buddhists. Bangladesh and most of northern India, which is now dominated by Muslim people, was once dominated by a Buddhist population. Could it be that the Myanmar military is trying to push back from being colonized by Muslims? Question mark. I'm just wondering. The military were killing babies and young children, and that was really disturbing for me to watch. And I imagine nobody would want to watch that. The one UN friend of Aung San Suu Kyi, how do I say that?
it sounds more like Suu Kyi.
Okay. Said that she was a strong believer in democracy. He said she changed and now is just a politician trying to get reelected. She's a politician, and so is he, and so are all of the UN folks interviewed for this documentary. If she doesn't get reelected, who is likely to replace her? The military? A dictator? So that's what I had to say about that. Now, I don't know what else to say about it. It's definitely worth watching, and it's very disturbing. I don't want to see babies getting killed. And well, they were doing other things too, and I believe all of it. I believe like the accounts of the Rohingya women saying they did this, they did that. I believe it happened. I believe all of it happened. So I believe all of those horrible things that they said happened.
Where this one was weak was it didn't deal with the so-called root causes. It looks as though the military is
just lashing out for no reason. But
or doing it for practice.
Whatever.
But one thing they said right at the beginning is the Rohingya had an insurgency. And insurgency is code for terrorism. So,
well, they did talk about the Rohingya people that had killed some military personnel and stuff like that first. So this wasn't just the military coming down on them for no reason, but yes, they are obviously killing people that were not responsible for killing the military, because I don't think the babies had guns in their hands or machetes or whatever and went after. So they're fighting terrorism with terrorism.
Well, that insurgency sort of stuff, that kind of terrorism.
Yeah.
Even if it's aimed at the military, it's very dangerous. Mm-hmm. When you hide amongst civilians, it's a war crime. So they're committing a war crime, right? And the reason why it's a war crime, from what I can tell, is because you attack that way, and it was a favorite of the communists. They used it in World War II. The French resistance was that. It's a war crime, really. And the partisan activity in I'm a left-winger guy. But the communists like doing this because it stirs people up, invites reprisals, and then, it involves extremism on both ends of the political spectrum, both ends of a fight. And so I don't know if partisan activity did much in Eastern Europe. We're in the occupied part of Russia. Russia occupied by Germany. So what it does is it just invites reprisals. And that looks to me what's happening in Rohingya. It's what happened in Eastern, in Western Russia. But the thing to do is not to fight them using partisan stuff. It's to use conventional military and stuff like that.
So I don't know. I don't know where the Rohingya people came from, when they ended up there. There was some mention of them being refugees in Myanmar.
Yeah, but you don't know.
But where? From where? And when?
Yep.
And obviously the natives who live there do not want them there. It's very obvious. So did they come from Bangladesh?
Have they been there
and
like
now
400
they are back
years?
in refugees
Have they been there 1,000 years?
I don't know.
I was trying to do some research before this.
Yeah, so that's where this is weak. They did not tell any of that. They didn't present it.
There seems to be almost like a cover-up of where the Rohingya came from, what their antecedents are, how they've been behaving the last, let's say, 20 years or stuff like that.
So anyway, and
sometimes violence doesn't exist in a vacuum. Sometimes it does. Like the violence visited on the Jews by the Germans in the 30s and the 40s was largely
well, and frankly, as much as anyway, this, I don't want to see this happening here. That's my point. Watch these together and just think about it.
Yeah, compare and contrast. You got terrorism in Europe, and the Europeans are wringing their hands.
Somebody's got to come up with some solutions pretty soon before that happens.
Burma, they've found something. It's like a final solution. It's not a nice solution or anything like that, but it's amazing. I don't see anyone commending the Europeans on their, it's just the opposite. Everyone's saying Europeans are overreacting, all this sort of stuff. Well, there are different levels of overreaction.
Anyway, so that's all I have to say about that.